All right. Good afternoonish, morning-ish. Happy Friday. We're so glad you're here. We're just going to let people get into the room with us, and then we will get started. And actually, Tom, if you want to just roll on into intros whenever you want, that's probably a good way to get into it. And then I can do a little bit of introduction for logistics, and then we can go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this talk on things to believe in when you don't believe in things, which is kind of a playful and lighthearted riff that came to me while I was soaking in the tub one day. And basically, what I want this talk to be about is a bit of an examination of existential theory and philosophy and how to apply that philosophy when you have a chronic, progressive, or terminal illness, or you're coping with someone and helping someone who has the same. So, this talk is going to be hopefully giving some different ways to approach the meanings in your life. And it this springs from my head. A lot of the talks that I've given in the last few years with Mettle have sprung from my head, and they come from 45 years of working with people with progressive and terminal illness. And I think about those people and I remember the ways that they coped or the ways they didn't cope, the things that worked, the things that maybe goofed them up. And then I start trying to put together some sort of coherent response to that and share it with all of you in the Mettle community. Some of you in the Mettle community may have been to my other talks, and so you know that they can vary a little bit from other talks at Mettle in that I have some data points I want to point out, some slides with bullets in them, some things that you can actually hang on to and consider moving forward to see if those fit and are right for you. So what I want to talk about is the ways that we make meaning in our life. And historically, across mankind's existence, a lot of the way we do that is in our myths, the creation myths, and also our religions, the creation of a religion to explain what is meaningful in this life. And most particularly, what the hell happens after we die? So that's what this is going to be about, is a little bit of a discussion of other ways that we can find meaning in our life besides perhaps the usual edicts of and dogmas of religions, cultural precepts, family stories. Maybe there's something more in us that we can create the meaning in our life, which is a very existential stance. So that's where I'm coming from. That's a good beginning. I'll let Sonia do the bookkeeping stuff.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Tom. So Tom's going to go through slides, and then usually what we do is we'll close out the slides, and at that point you can click on the raise hand button, and you can speak with Tom and ask a question or make a comment. And then if you'd prefer to not do that, you can click on the Q&A button and type in your thought or your question, and I will read it aloud for you. And the chat is also open as well. So if anything comes up that you want to mention or say, please feel free to put it in there. And if a question ends up in the chat, that's also wonderful as well. So multiple ways to kind of interact here and provide thoughts on what Tom is about to share. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sonia. I'd like to also say that the majority of the art in these slides are Sonia's brain finding them and structuring and creating the slides so that they are beautiful things. So our founding Mettle mother is the artistic creator here, and I'm very grateful for her.
Thank you, Tom.
And just for people who don't know me, I am one of the counselors at Mettle Health. So I do see people now who are struggling with chronic terminal or progressive diseases or who are grieving or working as a caregiver with those folk. Um, so just so you kind of know some of who I am. And uh, I am a nurse practitioner, so I've been doing primary medical care for people very sick. I am also a marriage family therapist and have a distant and varied history doing psychotherapy, just so you know some of who I am. Now, in this talk, I have some baseline assumptions, and they may not be your baseline assumptions. So I want to try to be as explicit about those so that you can see how this talk and my thoughts fit into yours. My first baseline assumption is that man searches for meaning to his life. And this seems to be played out repeatedly in a lot of the literature. People have talked about this, that we search for an explanation for why we are alive. And I think that is part of the basic nature of consciousness, that when a human is conscious and alive, we wonder why we are here and what it means. And as I've mentioned, historically, then we create dogmas, religions, myths, and legends that help us explain our lives. Now, when I look back at the people that I've had the honor to work with who are sick and dying, I have observed that many people's beliefs, whether it's their religion or their myth, are not deeply examined, and that they find the religion that they are part of vaguely comforting, but not deeply understood. That's been my experience. People might be nominally Christian or nominally Jewish and not have a whole lot of connection, except that when they pray or when they believe in Jesus's resurrection or any number of other religious dogma, they are comforted by these things. And particularly around religion and the explanation of what happens after we die, whether we go to heaven or hell, or whether we are remembered from our relatives and our survivors. But these beliefs, uh, because they are usually not deeply understood, can become challenging when we are then diagnosed and confronting a serious illness. So, when everything's good in your life, vaguely comforting dogmas work. But when you start to struggle with a serious illness, as you guys have probably experienced yourself or watched someone experience, they wonder, why me? Why has my God given me this terrible affliction? And this illustration is from the Omnum Borum, and it's just an old 13th century document. And I suspect it's actually the priest blessing these lepers. But when I look at it, it also looks a little like some of the drawbacks of religion, which is that he seems to be punishing them too. And so, what I want to talk about a little bit is that dogmas are are rigid rules. Hang on just a sec. There's drilling ahead of me. Sonia, can you hear that, or is it okay?
No, it's actually okay. I can't hear it.
Good, good. So it's just distracting to me. Um, Dogmas become very rigidified. And so people are told, here's what's going to happen after you die. And if you want to get to heaven, you need to live this kind of life. And so we become restricted into our dogma. And these can be comforting to us, even facing an illness, but often they come up short. And so I want to restate the purpose and meaning in our life does provide comfort and is consoling to us while we are suffering. But it is my belief that individually created meaning is going to be more authentic. Oh, it does. I agree with you. It is going to be more authentic and helpful than an institutionalized dogma. So that's a baseline assumption. And I don't mean to be harsh for someone who is very touched by their Christian religion or any other dogmas that they are living with. Um, but I also want to make the observation that the more examined someone's belief systems are that are based in a religion, the more rigidified they become in the religion's dogma. If you just think about, I don't know, the nun who's going to pray, and they just become very set in their rules. The rules of what's before them become very set. And that can become even more of a problem. So I want to open up the world and your thoughts to bigger concepts than just the dogmas that surround us every day. Okay, next slide. So, what I want to do today is provide options for your life's meanings besides those offered through religion, dogma, beliefs, myths, cultural dictates. I want to remind you of the vastness of the world and the multitude of ways that we can find meaning in our life and the ways to be consoled and comforted by what we believe. So I'll just restate again that I am a very strong believer in bringing purpose and meaning to our life, and that meaning is consoling and focusing and of value. Okay. We touch on this some. I love this art, but why do we create meaning? And I think that we can even wonder if creating meaning is a biological imperative. Do we humans who have the gift of consciousness, whatever we might define that to be, look around at the world and wonder what it means? And the minute we start wondering something essentially unanswerable is the moment we start creating. And so mankind has historically, from the beginning of time, as near as I can see, looked to the stars, looked to nature, and tried to explain it, or watched their loved ones die and wondered where they went, and then start to create something that is consoling. So we watch someone we love die, and of course, we don't know what happens when someone dies after they dies. There's a person on the planet who's alive who knows what happens after we die. And so there's a vast multitude of meanings that have been created around this because meaning is consoling. Okay. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes, Dustin's making a good point about I see people who seek healing from the church rather than medicine. Yes, I realize it's the age of artwork, but yeah, I totally get that. And I also love Karen's comment about don't come closer. So it is sort of up to us to interpret what that picture means, but it struck me as a little bit of an example of the rigidity of some religions. Okay, now we can go to the next one. That one. Yeah. Becker, Ernest Becker won the Pulitzer Prize in 1974 for his seminal work called The Denial of Death. And it is a powerful and moving book around ways that culture and mankind do everything in our power to not think about dying. And the most important thing I think that he created I need to pause a minute. Sorry.
No problem, Tom.
Yeah, I have to get out from under. We have drilling at our house, and I have to get out from under that. Sorry.
No problem. We will sit with Becker's denial of death.
Yeah, sit with
Do
that.
that. Thanks, everyone, for holding with us.
Is it loud up here too? Okay, can you go tell them they have to stop or do something?
This is the joys of life when things get interrupted. Oh, thanks, Karen. No problem. Hmm. Thanks for holding, everyone. Appreciate it. I'm trying to think of something to fill the empty space here. And the only thing that's coming to mind is Valentine's Day and love. I don't know if anyone has a thought on that. Hi, Jeannie. Oh, an obit writing workshop. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Thanks, Jeannie. Back to you. Yeah, Laura, I'm commenting on the obit writing workshop too. There's a project I just participated in, and one of the first activities was you write your own obituary first before you think about others, which was a really an interesting practice and a nice one. Hold on, Tom. You got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. I'm
There you
ready
go.
if everyone is ready. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready.
There was construction upstairs, and even if you guys couldn't hear it, it was so distracting to me that it was. All right. What I wanted to talk about was Ernest Becker's great book, The Denial of Death. And the reason I'm doing this is because our fears of death and what happens after we die seems to be the thing that drives us to create our meanings through our religions or our beliefs. Becker had an amazing comment or creation that he called the hero system. And he mentions the terrible price that the hero system causes. The hero system is when a person looks around and they need to feel something bigger than themselves, a way of becoming larger than their life. They want to connect in a way that's um, bigger and more meaningful than their life. And so the hero system is very prominent in the creation of our religions. When you join a religion with a certain belief that is uh, meaningful to you, the people who share that meaning become your clan. And so the hero system is wonderful in that it's comforting and you feel something bigger than yourself. Unfortunately, it also means that there's another. The others are on the other side, the non-believers. And so the hero system in humanity has become the single greatest cause of war and suffering on the planet, all driven from a personal desire to be part of something bigger, to feel connected to a God or a universe, and to feel a community. And it isn't just religions that use the hero system. Politics is exclusively the hero system. The Democrats are here and the Republicans are here, and there's a problem that there's an otherness. And so this otherness is a huge, huge problem to our planet. And so one of the things I'm trying to do today is to offer ways to find meaning in your life that are also not part of the hero system. Uh, is that clear enough? Do people understand some of what I'm talking about there? Thumbs up or something, everyone okay? Okay. So next slide. Oh, I should mention on Ernest Becker. This guy won the Pulitzer Prize in 1974. He also won the Pulitzer Prize while he was in the hospital dying of colon cancer at the age of 45. And I often think about him because here was this courageous fellow who basically removed some of the rose-colored glasses around the ways we face death. And then he had to go and face death without some of that. And so I hope that he found some of these things that we're going to move to talking about different ways of facing the world and our fears of death. Okay, so this slide is choosing our response to illness. And one of the things I want to say about this is all of us are going to die, and most of us are going to get a serious diagnosis in our life. It's a very rare person that will just wake up dead. And so all of us are going to be facing struggles with how to respond to our illness in our life. And one of the things that I believe is often missed when facing illness is, is the loss of the assumptive world. And that's something I know that Sonia and Bridget have heard me talk about before because I think it's so important. When we lose someone or get diagnosed with a serious illness, we lose one portion of our life. But that one portion of our life affects everything, and it affects our tomorrows. So the world that we assumed for ourselves would be happening tomorrow is now not going to be happening. And so we need to grieve deeply all of the things that we lose when we are diagnosed with an illness. And that is not really even just our health, but it's our perceived future. Our relationships are changed from illness, and our future is changed. So, illness can narrow a life, but I do believe and I have witnessed that it can also deepen a life. And so I invite people struggling with illness to consider that, the ways that their life has changed, to grieve that, but also to recognize that maybe you're a different person than you were. I don't mean to say that your illness is good, but maybe your struggle has led you to a deeper understanding of yourself, or even a deeper understanding of what is meaningful to you. Okay. So Viktor Frankl, I think people are probably familiar with him. He's my favorite existentialist because he's less about theory and more about action. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust. His wife, his family, his unborn child were all murdered in a concentration camp. But he made it through, and he wrote a seminal book about man's search for meaning. And in that book, and the other book he wrote, which is Say Yes to Life, he speaks about tragic optimism. Basically, tragic optimism is maintaining hope and meaning despite the pain, loss, and suffering that you're going through. Choosing to find your meaning even when the circumstances are tragic. I think tragic optimism is sort of a kind of silly term. It's a little very dramatic, but I guess we're talking about very dramatic things. In this tragic optimism, which may not always apply to ways you can respond to your illness, but he makes the point that the pain you're suffering can lead you to growth if you can maintain your optimism or your faith. The guilt you are suffering can lead you to change. And the death fears that you are experiencing can make you respond to the life you are living. And so I think that his approach to life and to suffering is very courageous. Uh, I can not imagine that I could have gone through anything that Viktor Frankl went through. But he's came up with this wonderful thing of tragic optimism, and I'm listening to it, and I'm wondering, I can't always do it, but are there ways that I can apply maintaining my meaning in my life while struggling with illness? Okay, next slide, please. Sonia, uh, can you go back a couple?
Yeah, I think I am worried that when
Right, yeah,
worried
we
we
got
missed this
there.
one, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sorry about that.
that's all right. These are we'll get there. Illness and meaning. This was the point that when you have your beliefs, they're often vaguely examined. How do we respond? How do our meanings in life respond to a serious diagnosis? How do they hold up? Are they comforting? Are they questionable? And the point I wanted to make in this slide is that a lot of times people ascribe their illness in the same way they ascribe their life, which is to give it meaning. And I'd like to make the point that illness doesn't mean something. It's just something that happened. But it means something to you. And so I'm encouraging people to be careful to not lay on the illness meaning, but instead look at the vastness of your life and start to consider how to incorporate the illness into your life. Okay, now we can, is that the only slide we missed, I think?
Yes, I think so. So then we would have you covered this guy, and then here we are.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so now we're getting kind of to the heart of the talk that I wanted to sort of share is then what does give a life meaning? I think you've now heard from me that I'm wondering, perhaps not the dogmas or the religions or the myths or even the family stories give a life meaning. And I'm making the point that we each create the meaning in our life, not the thing that was taught to us in Bible school or taught to us by our parents about why we're alive, but we get to choose why I'm alive and what is meaningful to me. And this slide has relevance just in reminding us around Frankl's tragic optimism that optimism is not required to lead a meaningful life. And I only say that because when we suffer, we don't always feel optimistic or happy about our circumstances. but we can believe that our life has meaning and that what we are experiencing is important to us. And that the meanings that we're talking about here are often found through our relationships, through the people that we love. Okay, next slide. So I can talk a lot about what gives a life meaning, and I think it's really important to identify that it's easier to find a meaningful and purposeful life when you feel well and when you're healthy. And so, how then, when you have this added component to your life of suffering, can you maintain your meaning to your life? And some of my thoughts are through reflection and honesty. When what's meaningful in your life is knocking up against your suffering, it's worth asking, is that meaningful concept valuable to me? Do I need to rework it? Do I need to consider a different way to live in this life or to consider what's meaningful to me? When coping with change, the hard changes, the difficult ones, there are a few things that Brad Stulberg talks about in his book, Master of Change, that I think are really important for anyone who is suffering or going through an illness. And the first one is the small certainties in our world. Yeah, we don't know how long you're going to live now, but maybe you know what you're going to have for lunch tomorrow. And so sometimes focusing on the thing you know as opposed to the unknown can be comforting and can help you rely on how to get through to the next small certainty. The other concept that he brought up, which I remember Sonia really being struck by because we haven't heard this before, is early plasticity. And this is a concept that states early on in a serious diagnosis or life change, there is a time in your ego structure when you are able to change. And I think that people have seen this in maybe someone who was diagnosed with cancer who decides to stop smoking or shift to a macrobiotic diet. These big changes are possible early on in a serious uh, change. And so using those early plasticities to consider if your religion, belief, politics, dogma, myth, if they work for you, and if maybe this is an opportunity for you to spread outside of the things you previously believed or knew. Yes, as opposed plasticity as opposed to, calcification. Yeah. And so early plasticity is definitely a concept, one that I encourage people to use when facing an illness. And I have a talk that I gave with Mettle a while back called When Yes Becomes No. And in that, we discussed how you make a change from one way of pursuing treatment to a different way of pursuing treatment, whether that's to go from palliative care to curative care, or curative care to palliative care, or palliative care to comfort care, whatever the shifts are. How do we drive our decision making? And I think this is really valuable when we are suffering and ill. And that is core values. What are the things that matter the most to you now in your life? Because these core values will lead you to your meanings in life. The things that matter to you now are the things that will help define your values. And so I always encourage people to think about what is most valuable to them today, with full knowledge that that value may shift tomorrow. So someone may say to me, I know that I'm dying, but I want to live until my daughter's wedding. That becomes their core value. And that becomes the thing that gives their life meaning and helps them define their plan of action. And so I think sometimes we don't do a great job identifying our core values, and I think they have value. But just like I've been saying all along with dogmas and religions, don't let your core value rigidify you into a treatment plan or a decision that isn't working for you now, you know? So maybe that's something that can shift. Your core values will be shifting. And that's why I think it makes it hard to sort of understand those core values. And the last thing I want to talk about is rugged flexibility, because I think it's a really good description of a good way to live our lives. Because we know that life is hard, and we know that there are struggles, and we know that things aren't always going to go just the way we planned. And so if you can maintain a flexibility to your life, you can respond in more powerful ways, in more effective ways to what's happening about you. And the ruggedness I love just because it's like it shows you are battened about in your life, but you have the capacity to shift and change to the immediate circumstances. Okay, next. All right, so here's where we finally are. Possible sources of meaning when ill and struggling and suffering. And if you look through them, you'll see none of them are, at least I hope, none of them are dogmatic. None of them are based on a particular belief beyond what is meaningful to you. So I'll quickly go through these. I'm really one for focusing on quiet joys. Um, instead of like going to a big party and talking to a lot of people and walking around and the exuberance of outside life, the quiet joy can be resting in bed and looking at a flower at your bedside. I love the quiet joys because they're always available to us, regardless of how we feel or where we are. So ask yourself, what are your quiet joys? And consider how you can cope with your struggles by really falling into the quiet joys. Another concept that I really like from a Swiss psychoanalyst named Verena Kast is her book on joy, inspiration, and hope. And in that book, she talks about the value of focusing not just on the intensity and the difficulties in your life and coping with them, but also embracing the moments of joy and inspiration. And she even makes a point of going back and creating an autobiography of joy. So maybe you're laying in bed feeling kind of shitty. You can cast yourself back to a memorable moment when you were happy, when you were 8 years old and climbing a tree. And she encourages you to remember the sun on your face and the feel of the bark on the tree and your sister who was with you, and just really bring the moment up in your mind. Because when you do that, you also bring the emotion attached to it. And so maybe at that moment you feel a little less bad because you brought in some joy. So an autobiography of joy can be a possible source of finding meaning and consoling comfort when you are sick. And our relationships, of course, are vital. We are social beings. Um, the very concept of the hero system is based on needing to be with people of similar beliefs who we love. And so our relationships are a huge source of comfort when we are ill. But we often forget about the natural world. You know, we see people who are very ill being wheeled out on a gurney to feel the sun on their face one last time. The natural world can place us within the hero system. It can make us part of something bigger, like nature, and yet not separating us versus them. So anything that can make us feel part of something bigger while not creating an other, I believe has great value. And when we are sick, we sometimes do our best to batten down our senses because maybe we have pain or grief or sadness. But what we smell and what we see and what we hear and what we feel and touch, these things can be sources of comfort. Just scratching a dog's ear or feeling the silk of a pillow. These things can be very powerful in reminding us and comforting us when we are ill. And then we go inside ourselves to our internal world, our thoughts, our feelings, our memories. And I think this was a particularly powerful concept in Frankl's work, is that he makes the point that the Nazis can do all this external stuff to him, but they can never change the way that he will respond to his circumstances. So our internal world and our internal thoughts are ours, and they are not for anyone else to take or rearrange or interpret. They're ours. And that internal world, what we're thinking and feeling, can be a great source of comfort when we are outwardly suffering. And our memories, we've talked about that as a great source of comfort. And also our legacies, laying in bed feeling ill and knowing that your children and your grandchildren will live on and remember you and also make great differences in the world. Just remembering how you have been part of this world and how that part will live on has great meaning and import. I hope those resonate with people. I hope it gives you all opportunities to see there are ways to structure your meaning in life without looking to an external world. Okay, next slide. Dr. Keltner is a professor at UC Berkeley, and he wrote a great book on awe as a path to meaning. And so a lot of this is repetitive, and I've talked about this, I think, in my talk on awe and synchronicity at the time of death. But these are other sources of finding meaning in our life and connecting to the world that is bigger than us. So, sort of feeding our need to be part of the hero system without impacting others. Some of these I think are very beautiful. Uh, Moral beauty is basically reflecting on someone's strength or intelligence or love their beautifulness as a human being. I sometimes think of the guy who had the shopping bag who stood in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. Like that's moral beauty to me, and that can enthuse me and give me awe. And awe as a source of connection and meaning is very powerful as we search for what our life means to us. Collective effervescence is a term I really love, and it has to do with I don't, singing together at a rock concert and feeling the snap and crackle of all the beings around you in a shared collective experience. This is meaningful and important. Music, nature, visual design, all terribly important ways to find awe, to lead us to meaning in our life, to be comfort and consoling to us. And then we reach spiritual and religious awe. And I think that's terribly important because a person might perceive that I'm trash talking religion here. And I want to acknowledge that for many of us, religion is our pathway to awe, which leads us to comfort and consoling and meaning in our life. And so I don't want to say that's wrong. I want to caution against the rigidification of religious dogma and also encourage people to evaluate it against the things that are meaningful to them. And dying is an awful experience. And recognizing this wonderful fluttering curtain between life and death as we watch a person die can really open up the world to something bigger than what we are. And lastly, epiphanies, which are these mysterious moments of knowingness that comes to scientists and religious people and us, just everyday people, where we realize something with absolute clarity and certainty. And these can be an awful, awe-inspiring experience. Okay, in the moments we have left, I want to move on to the next slide. This is something that I have created, summing up this talk and what my life means to me. So I took the talk and then I created this credo, which is my credo at this moment, because I recognize my credo may change. But a credo is part of the Catholic Mass, and it basically is statements that say, I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in eternal life. I believe in the Trinity, all, whatever they say in the Mass. Um, so I took that and I tried to find the things that give my life meaning, specifically in reflection to my work with folk who may be dying. And so I'm going to quickly read it. And what I want you to consider is what's your credo? And possibly this talk can give you the space to create that for yourself. So for me, now, I believe knowing I will die deepens how I live. I believe in paying attention and in kindness without explanation. I believe small acts of care accumulate. I trust the open hand of uncertainty more than the clenched fist of certainty. I believe presence matters more than answers, and practice outweighs belief. I honor the small before the grand. I believe dignity lives in choice, and I claim the right to choose my own way. I also believe that rest is allowed, even from trying to understand. I believe in the human imperative to search for purpose and meaning. but whatever I find along the way is enough. I believe meaning is made, not given, and that meaning once made can offer both purpose and comfort. I um I think this idea of creating a credo just came to me a while back, and I do really in like it. It's not a perfect thing, but I also recognize that it's a moving, living document for me. And that if I read through it sometimes, it can help me remember, here's how I want to be with people when I'm providing support and counseling and help to people who are dying. Or even here's how I want to be when I'm at a party and I'm just listening to people talk. It's like this can be grounding. This can remind me what's meaningful in life. So I know that on Monday, we're having a follow-up to this talk where I will be around. And one of the things I wanted to offer to people is maybe you would want to take some stabs at your credo and maybe share them with those of us in the room. Or maybe if this is confusing, we can design a credo with you. I can ask some questions about, what are the things that are meaningful, and then construct from the things that are meaningful to you your credo. So I guess what I'm saying is from what's meaningful in your life will come your credo. All right. Let me go to the last slide just quickly.
Oh, I don't know
That
why
one.
it keeps slipping. One sec. Here we
Wow,
go. Here we
wow,
go.
wow. There it goes.
Why?
To
Hold on.
give,
Do you see it?
no, I don't see
I
it.
don't see it either.
Stop for a moment. Here, no,
There we go. I don't know what's
there.
going on today.
There we
There we
go.
go. We got
Yeah.
it.
These are just a few of the authors that I've talked about today. Just if people want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into meanings in life, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a short little thing. But why don't we go back to the credo slide? That's the one that seems to want to stay on it. And in the remaining few minutes, happy to open up to questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, etc.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Tom. I love the credo. That was really beautiful to listen to. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I love the idea of writing one for myself.
Oh, good. All right. Well, we'll see what we come up with. It could be exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone, if you raised hand or any comments or questions, please feel free. Mm. Yeah, Jeannie, I'm thinking of your comment about the obituary that you were saying, the obituary project that you're saying you were going to do. And that combination of this, like a credo plus an obituary, would be kind of fascinating to put next to each other. This is how I'm going to live, and this is how I want to be remembered when I die. I can imagine they would be good accompaniments. Okay, one sec, we've got a hand up. Oh, Karen, wonderful. Karen, you know,
Lovely, Karen.
you know how it works. You might have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sonia. And I
Hi,
just want to
Karen.
say, Tom, an incredible, incredible, incredible talk. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
um, Viktor Frankl is one of my North Stars. And I'm not entirely sure this is correct, but I, to me, I think he expressed we create meaning in one of three ways: by creating something, through encounter, which I take to mean relationships, and how we handle unavoidable suffering. And I used to get hung up on that distinction between suffering and unavoidable suffering. And I did come to understand how I was choosing suffering when I did not have to. And just another comment, if you can say what the experience is for a patient when they're at early diagnosis and they're in the trauma of just having been diagnosed. I think it takes time to get to the point in in my case, one's cancer journey, to where we can pause and catch our breath and begin to, even a tiny toe dipped into everything you have just laid out. It's just miraculous that you've created this talk. I'm off air for your comments, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, so much. It's always great to have you with us. Yes, I love Viktor Frankl, and you're absolutely right. Those are the three things that give life meaning. And I think, if we realize his biography and he wrote those coming out of the Holocaust, it makes sense that he would talk about uh, needless suffering and how he can respond to the misery of being in a concentration camp. So that was one. And what was the second part? I wanted to respond to that. Now I'm blanking on. Um,
It
uh,
it may have been through encounter and also through creating
through
some.
creating, but your second part of your comment. Oh, I know, the early plasticity, the concept of
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I need some time to integrate this, and yes, absolutely, you do. I think what Stolberg is making the comment is that early in a diagnosis, when everything's all tossed in the air and unknown and uncertain, there is this small window of opportunity where you have early plasticity, where you're looking at everything in the air before it falls again, and you get to decide how to arrange it. And so there's this opportunity in an early diagnosis, early on in diagnosis, to reconsider what was meaningful in your life and decide if that's still the case. And sometimes, Karen, those changes are easier when everything's in flux instead of waiting for it to all define itself. So that was the only point, is that is an opportunity window that many people experience but don't always uh, utilize.
There's some comments here from Dustin. Dustin said, I like this very much. I feel that this might be a bit of a luxury, maybe not writing, but having experiences to put in it. That there are many patients I meet whose experience may have unfortunate circumstances, even beyond poor health. For example, suffering with substance abuse, homelessness, financial insecurity, estranged from family. Do you have any advice for thinking about credos for that group?
I absolutely do. And I appreciate that comment, Dustin, because I often struggle with uh, the realities of deeper examination to suffering when all you can do is keep your head above water. And I am very sensitive to that. Um, the point I would make around this is that if you ask anyone what their life means, they will probably have a vaguely fleshed out idea of that. It doesn't matter if they might be homeless. It might matter if they're heavily substance used and abused and um, not thinking clearly. But all of us end up constructing from either what we've been taught or what we've learned to believe the things that are important. And so I would say that I agree that a credo is perhaps a little overly fancy, but being able to say to someone, what matters to you now? Because as I've said, my credo will change over time. And if I'm really sick or if I were homeless, what might matter to me is to feel warm and to feel loved. It might be something like, I believe that each of us has the right to a comfortable environment. I believe that I am better when I am around people who love me. You know, I don't know, Dustin. You may have more direct experience right now with people struggling in very deep ways. Um, and Maslow's uh, triangle is relevant in that people do have to survive first before they can operate on higher levels. But if we take as an assumption that the search for meaning is almost a biological imperative, and that seems to play out over history, even through vast amounts of suffering, then I suspect everyone would at least benefit from being acknowledged that they have these thoughts and things are meaningful to them. I hope that helps.
Mm. Thank you so much, Tom. We are perfect. Oh, to 1 minute over, so
We're one
perfect.
minute over.
Perfect
Hopefully, I'll see
timing.
some of you on Monday.
Yeah, yeah.
And we
Tom will
can,
be leading the time on Monday. It's at 11 a.m. as well, same time as this webinar. And it's you don't have to register for it. It's just a live link that you can join. We'd love to see you there. If you signed up for this, you should receive the notification about the webinar recording as well as the information to join Tom on Monday, and we would love to see you there. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you everyone for joining
thank
us.
you,
And we hope you
everyone.
have a
Thank you
wonderful
for
weekend.
joining.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have good weekends, everyone.